Can you hear me? I don't think so. Can you? So we're beginning this morning with the Ruth Award. If all those involved in the Ruth Award would come up and begin to assemble. And everyone else find your place. Can't hear you, Ian. You need it up higher? Is this better? Does this location work better? Is that okay? Can you hear me? I should say, raise your hand if you can't hear me.
It's quiet here.
What?
You sound quiet to me.
Me too. Oh, turn that one off.
I see. We don't have a lot to work with there for materials. So I'll tell you what. Looks great.
All right, can you hear me now? They paid me for that. All right. Yep. All right, so this is a strong tradition of the Pacific Northwest Conference. We welcome the Ruth Award presenters. Are you going to explain?
Good morning. I'm Pat Simpson. We actually have 2 awards this morning. As traditions do, this one has grown to include the Marion Klein Award. Marion Klein was a Christian educator in the first class of full member elders in 1956, a pastor, missionary, and seminary professor in the Philippines, a lifelong pacifist and crusader for justice, the kind of woman we'd like to be when we grow up. So, women in ministry of this conference sometimes honor colleagues who exemplify this vigor and courage with the Marion Klein Award, and we have 2 today. The first one is Sharon Moe. Where are you?
What?
Come here.
What?
Those who have worked with Sharon will recognize these things: strategic vision, courage, prophetic preaching, recognizing talent and opening doors, and a sanity-preserving sense of humor. But you may not know the above and beyond about Sharon's ministry. The Kids for Hope camps, giving Palestinian village children a week exploring what freedom looks like, including 16 of them in the U.S., representing us vigorously at General Conference and helping to shape the prophetic identity of the Western jurisdiction. There's more to say, but no more time. Sharon, with respect and love, we honor you.
Good morning. I am Ruth Marston Beal, and I am honored to present the Marion Klein Award to Reverend Carolyn Peterson. Carolyn was one of the first time for everything. Carolyn was one of the first permanently ordained deacons in this annual conference, and we nominate her because of her embodiment of compassion and justice. Carolyn is a Christian educator, which means that she loves teaching children that they are beloved children of God, but she also is a Christian educator, which means when the world says you are not good enough, she says God loves you. Carolyn was, before the Me Too movement, before the child abuse scandals, advocating for safety for our children and vulnerable people in our churches. She put windows in doors. She advocated for making sure they had safe places to learn about God's love. She was a tireless advocate for LGBTQ inclusion, not just because of her amazing colorful socks at annual conference, but for her full embrace embrace of human sexuality as being an important and beloved gift, and for all of us to know that our call of beloved children and being children of God means that we have the gift to love one another. And finally, I have this image of Carolyn as a woman in black, which means that for 10 years in Olympia, she stood in her clerical collar, her rainbow umbrella, and with a fierce determination to say, peace and justice exist on this earth. It is our job to make sure it happens. Amen. Amen. After the end of 10 years, Carolyn stopped doing that. My heart broke a little because I thought this pillar of calling out in the wilderness had ended, and I asked her why. And Carolyn surprised me yet again. She said, well, I've done this for 10 years, and the reign of God isn't here yet, so it's time to try something different. So for your courage, your compassion, your justice, and your adaptability, we give you this award.
We at this time would like to honor the Ruth Award recipient. This woman is a prominent lay woman in our conference. After Ruth Steach, who this award is named, who also was a leader and someone upon whose shoulders many of us have stood. This woman, I'm not going to say much because there's someone going to say more, but this woman you will know by her actions in this conference, and she is Barbara Dad Schaefer. Yeah.
Where's my husband?
He's right there.
Come, John. Please come with me. Please come.
Where is she?
She's right there.
He's right there.
Jodine.
Your turn now. Yeah, you're eating.
Just talk about this because they can't see me.
I'm taller than Kay. Excuse me. Our information for Barbara, not only having known her, but we went and found John Schaefer's musing on WordPress. Her husband brags on her. It's 4 pages long.
Oh, my goodness. You aren't going to read all that.
No, we're not. Barbara Dad Schaefer has been active in public affairs, both at the local level of the communities in which they were serving and in the state of Alaska. They served several churches in Alaska before coming down here. Barbara was ordained as a deacon in the Methodist Church in 1962. That's back when there were two-step ordinations. And she was the first woman to be ordained in the Central Illinois Conference. And because of their decision to serve in Alaska, she did not finish seminary to become an elder, but she does have a year of seminary training. They spent several years in Alaska, but down here, the big thing that we know her for is Hope for the Children in Africa. The bishop put her on the task force for that 12 years ago. And how many times have you been into Africa? 5 times into Africa, raising lots and lots of money for Jamaletu. And how many of you have coins in bottles for Jamaletu? We have a whole bunch of those at our church. And that was part of what she started. They've been traveling a whole lot. And I see in here the Olympics in Denmark and Norway and China, and we're supposed to look forward to, this ended in 2015, what John wrote, we're supposed to look forward to Iceland, Greenland, Vietnam, Cambodia, Russia, and maybe Cuba. They've done 5 of those 6. This is an adventurous woman looking for God's kingdom to come throughout the world, But we especially welcome her in this conference as a leader for so many of us. So congratulations, Barbara. Come up here. Okay. You don't get to sit with us. Oh, good. You want to say something?
This is an unexpected but greatly appreciated honor. I am caught by surprise, but I'm not speechless. A moment ago, while I was puttering at the display for the orphanages, John grabbed me and said, "You must come here." He knew things that he was not telling me. The ministry is what it's about. Yes, I'm the one that you're choosing, and I do appreciate that recognition, but it's the ministry of our Lord, of the church, and specifically for me in the last 10, 12 years, about some children in a faraway place that we don't know their names, but we know of them as children of God who deserve, and like all of us do, to be cherished and well treated in our world. What will we do next? I am leaving the leadership of the task force. I am not leaving the task force, and we'll focus on one portion of that ministry about which I have great passion, which is post-secondary or college education. For what she didn't read in the comments, that I served for more than 30 years as a trustee of a university and have continued on another board that is national, that raises funds for United Methodist students at United Methodist schools. So that's also a passion of mine that has not been as obvious in your knowing me. So thank you for the recognition. Thank you for honoring the ministry of us all.
My name is Joanne Carlson Brown. For like 3 more days, pastor at Tibbetts United Methodist Church, and starting July 1st, be the associate pastor at Des Moines United Methodist Church. And one of the ways that we honor our Ruth Award, and particularly it'll be apt for Barbara, is that we give a scholarship to a young woman or a woman who is going to seminary to support their seminary education. And this year, we'd like to award the Ruth Award Scholarship to Alexa Eisenbarth. Yeah. She's a member. She's a member at Kennewick First and is studying at Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary. Alexa, are you here? Coming? Coming. There she is. All right. I don't have the check right now, but I have your address, and you'll be getting it. But it's from the generosity of mostly the women clergy and those under appointment that have generously donated to this Ruth Award Scholarship. If you'd like to support it, you can always send money to the conference treasurer marked Ruth Award Scholarship, and we can then maybe give out more scholarships. But Alexa?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Standing before us, making us strong, lending your wisdom to help us along, sharing a vision, sharing a dream, touching our thoughts, touching our lives like a deep flowing stream.
We are preparing for ballot for General Conference delegates. So if we could have the slide of the results of the lay ballot, the first lay ballot. And are the tellers ready with ballots?
Tess?
Tess is over here with ballots, and do you have your tellers? You'll recall you'll receive your ballot and you'll hold on to it until you're instructed to vote. But if those eligible to vote for lay delegate to General Conference would stand or raise your hand, the tellers will distribute the ballots. Have all the lay persons eligible to vote received ballots? Is there anyone still waiting for a ballot? One here. There's one over here that needs a ballot. Any more lay people that need a ballot? All right, then if all the clergy who are eligible to vote would raise your hands or stand to receive your ballots, and the tellers will distribute them. I see someone at microphone 3.
Just a quick question, Elaine. I saw the list of the results of the lay ballot. Did we put the list of the clergy ballot up on the screen again, at least the top?
We will before we take that ballot. Let's
Okay.
leave the lay one up until we take the lay ballot, if that's okay. Thank you, though, Julia. All right, are there any other clergy? Here's a clergy person waiting for a ballot. Are there any other clergy eligible to vote who have not received a ballot? All right, thank you, tellers. And our secretary has some helpful instructions.
Hello. Am I here yet? Yes. Two instructions for voting. One is for voting and the other is for when you hand in your ballot. If you spoil your ballot, if you make a mistake, raise your hand and the tellers will come and take your ballot and mark it void and give you a replacement ballot. But do that quickly and that'll speed the process. The other is when you finally hand your ballot in, if you hand it in right side up with the notch on the upper right-hand corner, more of the tellers will have more of the ballots oriented in the same direction, and that will help with the speed of the counting. Well, hold it right side up when you turn it in and with the top toward the teller, and that'll work. That'll help.
And I promised you yesterday when we read the results of the ballots that I would give you a clue of what had invalidated some ballots so that we could avoid that. The notes that I received from the tellers are that one person voted for too many persons, and that may have been around the confusion of whether we were voting for one or two. So again, on this ballot, we'll be voting for only one. One ballot was turned in empty. I don't know what this comment means, but I'll read it to you. One voted for a person out of range. So I don't know if that means someone ineligible.
It was a number beyond.
It was a number beyond the numbers
of candidates
assigned to people. That was an eschatological ballot. And again, two voted for too many persons. So just to say once again that you'll be voting for one person on this ballot. So when we'll have a prayer in a minute, and I'll instruct you to complete your ballots. When you've completed your ballots, you'll stand or raise your hand for them to be collected, and we'll try and maintain order in the room while that's being done. We're voting for one we'll take the lay ballot first. We'll vote for one lay person, and I've asked our conference lay leader to lead us in prayer.
Thank you. Holy One, be with us now. Guide our hearts, guide our minds as we make this important decision for our annual conference. We pray this in the name of your Son. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I declare lay ballot number 2 open. You may mark your ballots for one candidate. When you're finished, lift your hand or stand to have your ballot received.
Elaine, if they're lifting their hands right now before the ballot is closed, then...
Oh, thank you. No, I'm sorry. You need to hold on to your ballots. I apologize. Tellers, hold the ones you have. If you still have your ballot, hold on to it. I need to close it first. Thank you, Wes.
If somebody spoils the ballot, they
Does anyone need more time? All right, I declare lay ballot number 2. I'm sorry, we need a new ballot over here. Tellers, I need a new ballot over here. Raise your hand. The only thing I'm recognizing hands for right now is you need a new ballot if you made an error and you need a new ballot.
take the old one back.
We need a new ballot back here and one right here. Are there others that need new ballots? Are we still waiting for new ballots over here? Right, those of you that are voting need to be within the tables. I'm told there are marks on the floor in the back. Are you all still waiting for new ballots? No, there are two people behind you standing. Okay. And sir, are you waiting for a new ballot? No. Is anyone in the room waiting for a new ballot? So all the laity eligible to vote have their ballots. Right, ballot number 1 is still open for laity. Please complete your ballots. Does anyone need more time? Does anyone need more time? Does anyone need more time? I declare lay ballot number 1 closed. Lift your hand or stand to have your ballot received. No, Are there ballots still to be collected? Are there any outstanding ballots? I need to see your hand or hear your voice. All right, I declare lay ballot number 2 closed and the tellers are released. I want to say that once I have opened the ballot, we're not going to distribute new ballots unless you have a ballot that you have made an error on. So I need delegates to be in the room when we begin the balloting process. Do you understand? If people come in late, we'll not, after we've opened the ballot, we will not distribute new ballots to people. Thank you. So I guess I can't really release you, can I? Because you have to take another ballot.
We have permission to have them pass it to the end of the aisle.
Are you comfortable passing your ballots to the end of the aisle to have them picked up? Does anybody object to that? That'll speed our process up, so we'll do that in the future. Thank you, Tess. Okay, so clergy who are eligible to vote, you have your ballots? Good. I see a hand over here. It looks like there are a few clergy that have not received ballots. So, next time we're going to separate this. We're going to distribute the clergy ballots later.
We also need to see them.
So we need to project the results of ballot number 1, clergy ballot number 1. And those clergy who are eligible to vote that have not received a ballot, please lift your hand or stand so you can receive one. I see 2 over here.
Okay, there are people receiving them who are behind the bar, too. Are all the clergy who intend to vote within the bar?
Tellers, you all understand you're not to distribute ballots outside the bar. Encourage people to come within the bar. We just have to maintain some kind of order to this process. Are there any other clergy that are eligible to vote who have not received a ballot? All right, I see none. So, tellers, you're finished distributing ballots. We'll have we've already prayed over this ballot, and so in a moment I'll instruct you to vote. You'll vote for one. The results of the last ballot are projected. We'll vote for one. And when you're finished, well, I'll call for errors and new ballots. This is clergy ballot number 2. Is that the question? All right. So I declare clergy ballot number 2 open. You may mark your ballots. All right, does anyone need more time? We're not collecting them yet. Does anyone need more time? Are there any ballots, anyone that's made a mistake that needs a new ballot? Can I see the hands of anyone that's made a mistake that needs a new ballot? All right, I declare clergy ballot number 2 closed. You may pass your ballots to the aisle to be collected. Have all the clergy ballots been received? Are there any outstanding clergy ballots to be collected? So I declare clergy ballot number 2 closed and release the tellers. Thank you. You all are doing great work. You're being attentive and dutiful, and that's terrific.
There we have where we are right now.
Right. So we're going to quickly acknowledge guests who are present among us, and then we'll move into the final Anatomy of Peace section. So, Wes, do you have guests to acknowledge? No, you don't have that list.
I don't have that.
Is there a list of guests?
David,
All right, we'll do that when we get back together.
strategy for the Episcopal.
Where's this?
Strategy.
Oh, thank you. So we turn to Shane. I'm sorry, there's one other matter before us. Turn to Shane to to give a report about 2020 and Episcopal elections.
In 2020, under our current rules of the Book of Discipline, we'll have 2 Episcopal openings in the Western jurisdiction. Bishop Hoshibada and Bishop Hygia will both reach mandatory retirement age. That is what we are expecting as of this point. There is discussion to suspend the rules of the Book of Discipline about mandatory retirement age, depending on next year's special session of the General Conference. But in anticipation of 2 openings, we would like to do some pre-work. So we are encouraging people who are feeling a calling placed upon their hearts to run for the open episcopacy positions to spend this next year in discernment. By Book of Discipline, we cannot officially nominate until the annual conference before the jurisdictional conference. So we would not be able to officially nominate candidates until June of 2020. But we would like to encourage people to do that pre-work. At next year's annual conference, we will have a form available for people who are nominating themselves, would like to be nominated by others, so that they can declare that they are open for nomination for the next year to the conference session, and can thus spend the 2019-2020 calendar year talking to the Episcopacy Committee, the General Conference delegation, and others in our annual conference in preparation for the nomination. We hope that by providing this process, we will have a clear understanding of nominations and do the best that we can to give people feeling nominated chance to get to know others and talk about their calling to the episcopacy.
All right. Thank you very much, Shane. So we'll move now. We don't have that. So we're moving now to the Anatomy of Peace, the last session, and we'll move from there into the small groups. And we welcome once again Dr. Brian Brown. And I want to tell you how we got to have Brian Brown. See, I tend to be a little serendipitous and follow those serendipities. So Brian and I were both on the faculty for the training of new district superintendents and directors of connectional ministry last August at Lake Junaluska. And at worship one day, we were instructed to turn to the person sitting next to us and share something. I don't even remember what the assignment was. And Brian was the person next to me. And in our sharing, Brian was like, I wish every clergy person in their first 6 months in ministry was trained in the anatomy of peace. And I said, well, tell me more. And then I sat in the session and I ordered the book on Amazon during worship. I know, that's a confession, right? And then I found out that this was being recommended by the Commission on the Way Forward, and the Council of Bishops studied it in November. And so I got back in touch with Brian and said, won't you come, please, and introduce us to this material? So it's really been a blessing to have you here. And I just got to say, I think the Holy Spirit brought you to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Amen. Well, let's dig in. We've got 30 minutes, and I want to, again, start with some cliff notes to bring and refresh us to where we have been as we lean into the final session of our time together. Early on, we talked about the outward mindset and what is the importance of mindset. Why does mindset matter? And we leaned into the understanding that in most of our strategies and most of our ideas and processes that we use to move forward, we begin with behavior. We design these systematic prescriptions to move forward. And behaviors are important because behaviors do drive results. The collective behaviors of our coming together drive results, but underneath the collective behavior, there is the mindset, both individual and collective, that drive those behaviors. And so we went from there to understanding if we're going to have sustainable results, especially in an itinerant system, then we need to pay attention to the underlying mindset. Well, the good news for us is that there are only two mindsets that we need to contend with. And as we unpacked what those mindsets look like, we looked at inward versus outward, and we looked at various synonyms that describe them both. An inward mindset is when I am self-focused, self-absorbed, when I'm inside the box, when my heart is at war. It's at war in the concept of understanding that we were not meant to be an island unto ourselves, but by divine design, we were created to be in community. This is also the place where I'm guided by my flesh. The brain doesn't need my permission to conclude. It does it on its own. It takes old information and concludes way too soon before all information is gathered. And so that is the posture of making decisions and moving forward when our mindset is closed, when it's just reverberating past information where I'm self-absorbed. And when I am in this mindset, I have the tendency not to treat people as people, but to treat people as objects that can be used according to my particular objectives and the way my behavior is dictating my response. So if someone can be used for me to go to the next step in my personal agenda, then I may treat them as a vehicle that can involve all kind of niceties so that I can ride with them and they can drop me off at my next place of influence. And then there are those that I treat as obstacles. I have a vision that's all about me, myself, and I. I know where I want to go, and if someone is in the way, then they become an easy target of blame when the process is not efficient enough for my desire. Lastly, those that are considered irrelevant. Everything goes in as well as far as, is this someone that can be manipulated, used? Are they important to my agenda or not? And if they're not, then I can dismiss them. Yeah. Have you ever been in front of someone and the conversation wasn't too complicated, but they were glazed over in somewhere else? My. Yeah. And so we can get to those places where we are objectifying those that God has sent our way to be in ministry with. We juxtapose that to understanding that the other mindset that we can have is outside of the box. It's when my heart is at peace. It's when I have found this understanding that my very objectives and my very calling, the divine design that my Father created and knitted me together in my mother's womb, was designed to be in relationship with one another. And to get to where God wants me to go, I need those that God has put in my sphere of influence. And as we journey together, we bring down the silos, and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and synergy takes place, and the kingdom of heaven comes on earth. Yeah. That's where we want to find ourselves, in partnership with God. And it's in that outward mindset that we're allowing ourselves to be led by the Spirit, to be guided by the Holy Other, that thing, the imago Dei that God has given all of us. And so we juxtaposed the difference. One, I'm focused on my results. The other, I'm focused on our results. My results don't disappear. I just understand that God has created this world such that its transformation comes together when we come together. From there, we went on to talk about what an inward mindset invites in others. Don't you know you receive dozens upon dozens of invitations every day? The question is, which ones will you accept? How many know that you shouldn't accept every invitation you're given? Today, somebody's going to invite you inside the box. And it's up to you to not be on autopilot, but be awoke so that you can listen, but not accept the invitation, and maybe offer one of your own. An inward mindset invites others to do the same. And so we talked about the example where if I'm in the box towards someone else, if I see them as an obstacle, then when things don't go my way, I have a point of reference to justify my inefficiency. Yeah. I begin to blame the outside world for my inner turmoil within. And I lose my peace. I'm focused on my results only, and I am caught up in the flesh as opposed to caught up in the spirit. And so what do? I objectify them, and then I blame them, and that creates this whole process all day long. Most of us, when we're not paying attention, we're on autopilot, and we receive the Spirit, we receive that which someone is giving, and when I blame that person, she can sense it, he can sense it, and they often will give you double for your trouble in whatever regards it is that the blame is for. And so this person will in return blame me for various things, and it starts off as a friendly disagreement. Yeah. And then over time, if one of us does not come to ourselves, then it escalates, and the energy grows, and it grows until we have this state of collusion where we are feeding the very thing that we were complaining about. Collusion is a conflict where the parties are actually feeding the very behavior that was the problem in the first place. And so it goes around and around, and if once it reaches a certain capacity, then it's time to pass out invitations. And so I pass out invitations to others to join me in that place of collusion, and before we know it, all of our closest friends have become allies if they've accepted the invitation to come on board, and we've got these silos, and not only is the conflict now between me and this person, it shifts the mindset of others. All throughout the day, we can be in an inward mindset with some and an outward mindset with others, because it affects every relationship that we're a part of. It affects our relationship with our spouse, with our friends, with our siblings, with our co-workers, with our committee members, with our church, and on it goes. And it spreads like a virus. The more I'm inward in any relationship, the more is the tendency for that to spread into other relationships. We shared the example of the church that I was blessed to pastor that had become two huge entities that were in the box. And the ones on the outside of the diagram, these were those that were watching this turmoil go on, and the majority did not accept the invitation to be a part of this. They came to worship, and instead of worshiping 800, the church was worshiping 398 on a Sunday, because they came to worship, not to be invited into collusion. We talked about how collusion, how being inside the box, being guided by the Spirit, how it affects disagreements, how they escalate, how it affects everything that we do, including our well-being, and how it affects our bottom line, and that is making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Well, today, this morning, we're going to move to that place of how do we turn outward? Are there any tools that we can use? Are there any things that can serve as red flags so that we move out of this place? And today will hopefully be exciting. I know many of you, when I went through the training my first day, I couldn't wait to get home and get on the phone, because I thought of all the other people who should have been there. Yeah. Then by the end of the presentation, I began to ponder, maybe it's good I'm here. And so we're going to take a look at how we can turn outward, and we're going to go to a tool known as the influence pyramid that can guide us from a place of war to a place at peace. It's something that can be used in all of our relationships, and we're going to see how we go through this at various stages. The pyramid is designed into two portions. One is dealing with what has gone wrong, and the other is helping things to go right. So we'll spend the majority of our times on the prescriptive work, on being proactive in helping things to go right instead of helping or being reactionary for things that may go wrong. As we look at the pyramid, we start off with understanding the first place that we have to hang out is getting out of the box, spending our time in relationships, and specifically in the area of the greatest place of dis-ease, of at war, getting out of the box ourselves. It's like one of those, if you think of a bicycle that's turned upside down and you give it momentum, one of the wheels, and it's spinning and it's spinning. When you take your hand off of the wheel, it still spins for a while. And so when we recognize that we're in the box, it takes a moment. It would be nice that we could just switch, but sometimes it's not that easy. And so hopefully that imagery will help. The first thing is to take the energy away from it and then spend that time in prayer. God, help me to see what you see. Help me to be guided by your vision so that I walk by faith and not by sight, and I can enter this place of new understanding. And so that's where we must begin. It's the base of the triangle. It is first base. Doing anything else is running the second base. And if you've ever seen somebody play t-ball and run the second base, you got to go to first base first. And for us, in getting out of the box, it starts with having a mindset outside of the box, asking the Spirit to guide us. If we're going to have influence that lasts, it begins with our mindset. Secondly, it's about building relationships. This annual conference has been doing a lot of work that builds relationships. I wish I had about 24 more hours to just talk about relationships and the power, the side effect. There's so much that goes on in building relationships that is about the building of the kingdom of God that we cannot ever underestimate what happens in those small groups and when we come to learn about one another. And so the first step, once we've declared that our heart is at peace and we're ready to move forward and do the things that God has called us to do, is to build the relationships. But we're going to build the relationships in two ways. It's not just about building the relationship with that person or group. It's also about building the relationship with those that influence that person or group. The second Sunday after Pentecost, I've got to share this story with you. It was after worship. I was downstairs getting ready to go into a homecoming committee as we prepare for our bishop to come and preach at our homecoming. And I'm at one end of the hall, and I hear this voice, "Pastor, Pastor." And I look down the hall, and there is the match and the gasoline walking hand in hand. Now, I got to tell you, my first thought was I had preached up a storm that Sunday, and I was sweating, and I said, well, maybe it's a mirage. Is it real? So I reached for my phone because I had to get a picture of this. And smiling hand in hand, and I couldn't believe it. So I made my way, and my mouth dropped open, and she began to tell me the story. Now, you got to understand, this is match and gasoline. I'm not talking oil and water. At least they can coexist separately. These two you had to keep away from. You don't bring these two together. It's not a good idea. And they're arm in arm, and they're both smiling, and she shared the story. And these are two individuals, highly successful influencers in the world, and they, in their own right, influences within the church. But they had this explosive tension had developed between them. And she said that that weekend she had some guests from out of town, and she was entertaining, and they were out and they were at dinner, and the conversation switched to church. And she said her countenance dropped when she thought of this person. And she began to tell her brother-in-law about John Smith, who was just tearing apart everything that she knew about the right way for sustainable results in the church. How he was such a deterrent to where we should go as a church. And then as about 5 minutes into, she said she was going up one side and coming down the other side. And about 5 minutes into her rant, he said, wait a minute, did you say John Smith? Did you say he was from Detroit? I know a John Smith from Detroit. What's the name of your church? He goes, that's the same John Smith I know. Her mouth dropped open, and then he said, let me tell you about the John Smith I know. About 28 years ago, I was seeking a job on Capitol Hill, and someone suggested I get in touch with him. He said, come on down, I'll show you around. I booked my flight. He picked me up from the airport. He took me around the halls of Congress. He introduced me to individuals that would be a part of the team I may be working on. And then he took me back to the airport and prayed for me when I left. I was given an interview to come back and eventually given the job. This John Smith brought me and my family into his house. And he housed us and fed us for a month until the right place opened up. And that was 28 years ago. Had it not been for John Smith, then there's a chance I wouldn't have married your sister. So the hand came off the wheel, but it was still spinning. She was caught aback by this other way of viewing this man from the very pits of you-know-where. And so she was disturbed to the point that she couldn't get rid of it. Later that night, they were having dessert, and now she was talking to her actual brother. And he said, you know, I heard him, but I can't let this go. And then her brother said, well, are you going to listen to the flesh, or are you going to be guided by the Spirit? She said at that moment, as those that had gathered there in Jerusalem, I was cut to the heart, and everything changed. In building the relationship with that person, it's not just only about finding out what makes them tick. It's finding out what did we miss in the imago Dei in that person, so we can see them in the way that God sees them, which is bigger than we have come to conclude. My. After we get to that stage of going through building the relationship, then we move on to listening and learning, because we have the capacity to listen and learn. We listen with more of our faculties once we have information on what is driving that person. And that happens in the relationship, in that context. So our listening is heightened, and our ability to hear is even greater. After listening and learning, we then go on to teaching and communicating what it is that God has placed on our heart and given us as a vision for all of us moving forward into the preferred future that God has for all of us. And then lastly, if it's needed, there is the correction, that place where we spend the littlest time in bringing about shifting in direction. So what are some of the lessons that the pyramid teaches us? Well, first, work from the bottom up. That's where we begin. We must spend most of our time from the bottom and then work our way up to the top. Most time and effort should be spent at the lower level of the triangle. We always start from the base, and we don't go to second base until after first base. As we're working on the bottom of the triangle, then when we get stuck, we go to the level below that place. So let's say that we're at correction and it's not working. Then we don't continue to pour energy in correction. We back up and we teach and communicate. Why is it that we want to go in this direction? If the teaching and communicating isn't working, we back up and listen and learn what are the objections to going in that direction. If the listening and learning is not working, we back up and we start building the relationship to understand what that person sees, what that group sees. And then if that is not helping, we go back and say, God, I need you to free me up some more so you can help me to be a better listener. You can help me to truly be a better builder of the relationship. And ultimately, mindset matters most. The reason why mindset matters most is because if we go straight to second base, then everything that we do is built on a foundation that's not sustainable. The mindset in the pyramid is, again, extremely important because when we find ourselves operating from a heart at war, then we find ourselves putting all the energy in the wrong places. When our mind is at war and we're just going back through the information that yesterday has taught us, and we're not in the presence of the Holy Spirit trying to teach us in the present moment, then we spend the majority of our time in the corrective point, in the corrective stage. Yeah, we got any parents here? My. Yeah. We know what it's like to say, hey, and you know what? My father, that's where he spent all his time. Yeah. Do as I say, not as I do. Dad, why should I do that again? Well, because I told you. And so then I became a parent. So, well, it was good. It worked on me. And yet, God calls us to graduate and be better than those that went before us. Amen? And so we have this inverted way of spending our God-given energy each and every day. Every day is created with brand new grace and mercy. We only have a given amount of energy just for this day, a certain amount of seconds. And what does it look like to spend that time in alignment with God's will for our lives? Well, when our mindset is inward, when our mindset is at war, then our energy is inefficient at very best. I want to share a video about a true story. Chip Huff, he is a SWAT officer, and he went about his work in his particular department as an officer, as one of the leads, and there was a certain method to his madness. And then he came across the Arminger material, and he went through the training, and he tells the story of what shifted. Let's check it out.
So we served a search warrant on this house that had been occupied by some gang members, and the whole purpose of them being there was to sell drugs. We kick in the door, and there are several gang members in the house, and we get them all secured and rounded up, and we've separated the main group of the gang members off from this one individual that the detectives wanted to talk to. So he's standing by the couch. And tactical protocol says that we put everybody in a seated position. So I look at this guy and I say, sir, I need you to sit down on the couch, please. And he looks me right in the eye and he says, I'm not sitting down on that couch. But this guy was dead serious, convicted, he's not sitting down. And my initial reaction was to push him down on the couch. I could literally feel my arm moving that way. But I had just been to one of my inaugural Arminger facilitations. And one of the things we focused on was the influence pyramid. I recognize right away that I'm at the correction, the tip of the pyramid, because I'm telling him to do something. I'm making a direct correction, and it's not working. And one of the principles I remember the facilitator emphasizing was that if you're having problems at one level of the pyramid, the solution's generally at a lower level. So I thought, okay, what's the next lowest level? Teach and communicate. So I started explaining to this man why I need him to sit down. I say, sir, here's the deal. We're going to be coming in and out of this house with all kinds of equipment to search and photograph evidence. We're going to be moving around a lot. If you're standing up, you're going to be in the way. Other people are going to want to stand up. It's going to prolong our time here, and it's going to make everybody's day longer. You know, so I just really need you to sit down. And I was pretty proud of that effort, by the way. And he looks right at me and says, well, that's good, but I'm not sitting down. Now I go back to that natural instinct. Move back up the pyramid, push him down on the couch. But I'm fighting it because I'm thinking I'm going to stay in this. I'm going to stay in this. And I'm going to work my way down the pyramid. What's the next level? The next level down from teach and communicate is listen and learn. So I simply ask the question, sir, why won't you sit down on the couch? At that point, he looks at me and says, I'll tell you why. I was shot a few weeks ago. I've got 7 pins in my knee. The doctor said if I bend this leg, the pins are going to pop out, and I'm going to have 2 more surgeries. He said, I'm not doing that for anybody. It was like this light bulb went on all of a sudden, and I'm thinking, man, I wouldn't sit down on that couch either. If I was in that position, are you kidding me? Like I just understood in this moment why this guy was so resistant. So I look around, I find this stool, and I said, I'll tell you what. If I move this stool over here and we can position your legs straight, you can sit down and have your leg on the stool, would you sit down then? And he says, yeah, I'll do that. So we get the stool in position, we help him navigate into a seated position, get his legs straightened out. Everything from there goes smoothly. And I'm sitting there reflecting on this, like in the moment, right? Number one, I'm excited because this worked. Like, you know, something I learned during a training actually worked when I operationalized it, you know. You don't understand how rare that can be. I start reflecting on the potential cost. Like, what would have happened if I would have used the correction and just shoved this guy down? You know, the pins are popping out of his knees. We're going to have to call an ambulance. Now he's getting loaded out of there on a stretcher. Everybody in the neighborhood's going to see that. He's going to tell his version of the story when he gets out of the hospital, and it's not going to sound anything like my version. We're looking at the potential for lawsuits. We're looking at the potential for community complaints. These things are almost certainly going to happen. And even if we win the lawsuit, the cost of litigating it is incredibly high. Man, it just struck me, and all these potential consequences, how they were avoided by this short, thoughtful conversation, by working this framework that we had learned in the facilitation. And, you know, it literally took as long to work through that pyramid from the top down as it took to tell this story. And that was the amazing part. It was extremely efficient.
So I want to invite you, when you leave these hallowed grounds, to go home and consider the people in your life and ask, how have I been seeing them? Leverage the pyramid to help things to go right and see what happens. I brought a few extra books because I thought you might run out. The Pacific Northwest to the Pacific North Annual Conference, Northwest Annual Conference. Thank you for your radical hospitality. It's been a joy being with you. Amen.
Bless you. Thank you so much. It's really great to have you.
Thank you. Amen.
All right, we have just a couple of things to do before we break into table talks again. And one of them is there are guests that we've not been good about introducing. So I'm not sure that they're all in the room, but if you're in the room, I see Curtis Brown is over here, who is one of ours, but works with the Discipleship Ministries on Path 1. So Curtis, thank you for being here. I want you to see these folks. Come on up. I want you to see these folks so that if you're standing in line at lunch next to them or elsewhere, you can greet them. So Curtis, welcome.
Sorry.
No, it's not a problem. And Paula Whitbeck is here from Westpath. Oh my goodness, do we love Westpath. I heard on the radio day before yesterday that the average person retiring in America has $60,000 in retirement savings. You all take good care of us. Jenny Phillips, are you here? Jenny's here. Jenny's with the General Board of Global Ministries, again, one of ours. And Tim Overton Harris. I know I saw Tim a second ago. Tim is the district superintendent from the Cascadia district in the Oregon, Idaho Conference, and we try and have exchanges back and forth. So, Dean of the Cabinet in Oregon, Idaho. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you all for your ministries. The other thing I want to just mention is there were some petitions circulating in the body that's not consistent with our rules. It doesn't mean we disapprove of you, but you can circulate them at the lunchtime or outside the bar of the conference. You can come up here and get them at the break. Okay, quickly before we go to break, I'm going to announce the ballot. Lay ballot number 2. Number of ballots cast, 211. Number of valid ballots, 209. Number needed for election, 105. We have one election. A. Skylar Beal with 107 votes. And here are the other results. Brant Henshaw, 58. Nancy Tam Davis, 20. Christina Gonzalez, 11. Noriko Lau, 9. Nikki Dyer, 4. Clergy ballot number 2. Number of ballots cast, 145. Number of valid ballots, 140. Number needed for election, 71. We have one election. Elizabeth Schindler, 86. The rest of the results are as follows. Greg Seeley, 23. Nicholas Romaine Stout, 14. Austin Atkinson, 10. DJ Del Rosario, 1. Gordon Schnee, 1. David Valera, 1. Meredith Gudger Rains, 1. R. Duncan, 1. G. On, 1. Laura Bolger, 1. We'll continue balloting later in the next plenary, but I want you to have those results to inform your conversations around the edges. And with that, we release you to table talks. We don't really have a break schedule now. We have one scheduled when you come back from table talks. So go as quickly as you can to your table talk areas. And we'll see you back here. Let's see, right now it's, we'll see you back here at 11, 10, 11. What time?
10:45, I think.
10:45. It's close to 10:45. We'll convene at 10:45 with a ballot.